what I'd like to do in maybe a little bit of untraditional fashion is I'd actually ask that each of our panelists introduce themselves. And just again, I'd say keep it brief if you could. And in my old-fashioned ways, I'm going to allow Sarah to go first.
Matthew, thank you. So my name is Sarah Chessis. I am the CEO of Sew You. Sew You creates on-demand apparel collections for influencers and celebrities. So it's a sustainable product.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Bobby?
Yes, so Bobby Östberg, I'm the founder and CEO of Size Me. We work to help innovative brands sell and produce clothes, individual clothes, produced on demand. I've been working on the space for almost a decade by now, so I'm very passionate about the topic at hand.
Great, Bobby. Jess?
Yeah, I'm Jeff. I'm the VP of Product and Strategy at Bold Metrics. We are a SaaS tech company really aimed at providing apparel companies the ability to unlock the power of their actual shoppers' body data in many different ways. We have numerous products, but the one kind of most relevant to today's topic is our virtual tailor, which is a highly accurate and scalable way to really create an AI body scan of your shopper that can be used for on-demand production of clothing in their actual size, but probably more importantly, their fit preference as well. So very excited for this discussion, and even more excited that on-demand is gaining some steam in apparel finally.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Jess Fleischer.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm Jess Fleischer. I'm CEO and co-founder of Son of Tailor. Son of Tailor is a direct-to-consumer brand who primarily doing T-shirts, but also other casual wear like sweatshirts and polos on demand and made to measure as well. I believe we were the first company to do casual wear, at least T-shirts in the world on a direct-to-consumer model. And yeah, we are now 7 years into our journey, and yeah, have been expanding since we got born.
Great, thank you, Jess. And last but not least, Kurt.
Hey, good morning, and thanks, Matt. My name is Kurt Cavano. I'm the CEO of Nimbly Made, and we're an on-demand tech platform for the knitting industry, for knitting garments, to allow companies to be able to use computer-driven knitting to go from units of one to units of tens of thousands on our platform across a set of factories that are members in our base of factory base.
Excellent. Thank you, Kurt. And thank you all for doing that. I know sometimes non-traditional, better for you to introduce yourselves than me to botch it, if you will. And I'm Matthew Wallace. I'm the CEO of DXM, and we are also a technology-driven on-demand manufacturing company. It is a platform model, and it's an ecosystem made up of actually 20 plus organizations together, and also a startup. But forget about that. Let's get right into it. Excited about this diverse panel that has lots of experience in the industry and with on-demand and the learnings and whatnot. So, Kurt, I'm going to jump right in with you. How would you define on-demand manufacturing?
Well, traditionally people think about it as units of one, which is a consumer asks for it, you make it, and that is on demand. That's definitely on demand. But I think it's more relevant to think about it more broadly, which is you can have units of one and the customer asks for it, you make it on demand, but you can also think about it as how can I shrink the lead times so that I'm making small batches that are closer to the demand of the consumer. And it's trying to get your time down to the point where you get demand signals and you're producing based on that. The old model of figure out what you want to make, send it overseas, bring it back in a container, hope it sells, that's the wrong model. The right model is read and react to demand and shrink the time frame as quick as you can. And that could be a unit of one and it could be 10,000, but it's all about getting closer to that demand process.
And I saw Bobby, you shaking your head pretty hard there forward. So I'd love you to weigh in on that, because someone once told me, Kurt, hope is not a strategy, right? Put it in a container, hope it gets here and sells. right? That's just not a really good strategy. And it's really resonated with me. But Bobby, I'd love for you to weigh in on that, because again, I saw your passion kind of light up as Kurt was talking about it, on your perspective, or add on to some of what Kurt was saying, if you could, about, again, how would you define on demand, or what you heard from Kurt?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what Kurt was saying. I think the model where we make essentially guesswork leads to what we produce and hope it's going to sell. And in many cases, it doesn't. If you can move the demand to more or less real time, so when the individual consumer has a wish what they want to buy, you connect that straight to the production. I'm with you, Kurt. I would also include near demand, that you can shrink sort of inventory to make sure that you, at the end of the day, what is not working so well today is that you have a massive amount of overproduction. And if you can get closer in time between demand and production, you by design limit that risk of producing things that people don't want.
So if on-demand limits risk, it takes the guesswork out of it, right? So Jess Fleischer, and I'm using your last name because I don't want anybody to mix up Jeff and Jess. It's easy to come off my tongue incorrectly here. So why is on-demand manufacturing not more widespread across the industry, right? What are the challenges to this implementation that the industry is seeing, we're seeing, et cetera?
I think there's a couple of challenges. First, there's a challenge of time and price. So I think price is, at least for us, we are not yet at a mass manufacturing cost level. We're working to get there, and I believe we'll get there for our t-shirts in a couple of years. And the second one is time, right? So getting it out. So we are dealing directly with the consumer. We have an average shipping time of 7 days to the consumer, and that's we believe, because we cut it down like dramatically over the years. But we can just see our customers. They believe that is still too long time, because they're used to going on Amazon, getting it next day. So 7 days is too long time still. So I think that's a limitation. And then I think for the industry and as a general, there's a limitation. There's also a habit thing. They are definitely animals of habit. They're going into an innovator's dilemma. Making the shift to on demand is quite a big thing. And in the beginning, they'll see slow results of doing it. And that will make them think, okay, we move back to the old model. And we've seen quite a couple of venture corporate startups, if you can call them that, trying to do it. And then they've actually went away from it again.
And just a follow up with you, because, as you introduced yourself, you had said, look, you've been at this a bit, right? I think 7 years plus at this point. How have you seen it evolve? Because again, as far as getting it more widespread, right? And have you been able to see it grow? And has it been through example of it worked or it didn't work, or is it just continuing to push it up the hill? You use the word habit, right? That there's a habitual thing, and I saw Kurt shake his head yes to that, right? I know a long-term veteran of the industry also. How have you at your organization been able to push that up? And then I'm going to do a follow-up question with Jeff on the technology side, not just Jeff. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll try to start. I think so. First of all, it's awareness, and I think building that awareness and building that momentum. So like for the first couple of years, we hardly had any customers, despite we know there's a huge demand for made-to-measure t-shirts. But just getting the word out and getting people to Google that they want a made-to-measure t-shirt, not something they just think about when they look at themselves in the mirror, that has been a huge effort, and that battle hasn't stopped for us. We're nowhere near the finish line there. But we can see it builds on as recognition comes to us. And things like the pandemic has definitely, where a lot of big companies, they have suffered from long and complex supply chains, that has definitely built onto that trend.
Great, thank you. So Jeff, from the Bold Metrics perspective, right? When you talk about why it's not more widely spread across and some of these different type of challenges, right? How can technology, do you feel, enable, and how do people get comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think it's, there's a lot with, when you're speaking kind of to larger apparel companies where their supply chains have been the way they are for a long time, very fragmented, not really conducive to all come together in a way to take an order from order to get it in someone's door in an on-demand way. So I think that's where really technology is starting to come together and help, apparel brands kind of shift their way of thinking of the old supply chain to this new supply chain. And, you have some apparel companies trying to piece together different parts of that on-demand manufacturing process. And then there's companies like DXM that's creating this more simple platform approach where it's already pieced together. You can come in, own the PDP page on the website to the time the consumer gets it. So it's exciting to see like that technology starting to make it easier, I think, for larger apparel brands that really have to change the way they're thinking about their supply chains versus a startup that's starting from scratch and can really build something on demand, still using technology, but you're not like completely flipping the switch on how you make product if you're a startup.
And Sarah, I promise we're coming to you next. I just want to ask Kurt a question, because Kurt, if I just know that, look, you helped in the technology, you helped change a way in which companies, big companies, did business in a former, I think, area of yours, and it may not have been this. Can you weigh in as far as how you feel your technology and Jess's and Sarah's and Bobby's and Jeff's, can really convince and play a role in what's the one or two hurdles that you say we need to get over at this point to kind of really get on demand moving?
So yeah, and in my last venture, which was Trade Card GT Nexus, we changed the whole purchase order payment process for 60,000 different factories, and it was highly successful. And the real secret there, and I think the real secret to what we're doing at Nimbly, is it's about being able to articulate the value to the brands and getting them to understand it. And the challenge is, and Jess said it exactly, they're stuck in their old ways. They're totally focused on the wrong things. And it's about getting them to change the way they think about their business. And that is really, really hard. The good news is the pandemic has really flushed out this whole idea that working capital can be a real challenge, like when you buy a bunch of stuff and you can't sell it. And so that's woken everybody up. And then the big rush to online, all these digital native brands, they don't think about it the way the old people think about it. The old people being the incumbent brands, not that everybody there is old. So they're forcing change as well. And then when you layer on technology that enables it to be able to connect together factories, to be able to link together demand with supply and reduce that time, you can really change and make it happen. But the biggest barrier is not technology. The biggest barrier is people. And they're stuck in their ways with how they do things. And so for us, we found it's about getting as high in the organization, usually the CFO or even the CEO, to be able to explain how this can change the way you use working capital. This can reduce your risk. This can significantly increase your margins, but you have to change the way you think about things. And that, I think, is the biggest change. Interesting.
Thanks for that, Kurt. And again, there's a follow-up. There's another question coming towards you, Bobby, on this, but I'm gonna move to Sarah, because there's a topic that continues to come up more and more. The word sustainability, the word circularity, right? We continue to hear about this, right? We continue to hear about the waste. I've never seen actually a confirmed report that states that 21% of everything produced in the industry is actually waste, but I've heard that number, right, 20%, a lot, right, across my experience in the industry. So Sarah, what is the sustainability impact of the on-demand manufacturing model, and how can we get that message across to perhaps influence the people that Kurt just referenced? Because every big company, every organization seems to want, right, to be more sustainable and are putting, promises out there, and kudos to everybody, right, for making the effort, because it's needed.
Thanks, Matthew. I think it's a great question. And I think, truthfully, I think sustainability is the absolute core of on-demand manufacturing. So I didn't come from the apparel brand industry. I was in finance for years, and I had this brilliant idea that I would set up an on-demand women's high-end suit business. And, again, all the stuff that you've touched on previously, I couldn't get anybody to manufacture for me. So I ended up opening up my own sort of mini micro factory. And literally what I know about manufacturing, you can write on the back of a postage stamp. And it was probably the worst factory on the planet. We had no idea what we were doing, but look, we learned as we went along. But and the reality is that what we did learn a lot about was how inefficient the current model is in terms of sustainability. And there's, I think the figure is 20% of all water pollution comes from apparel dyeing. And yet 50% of all apparel remains unsold and ends up in landfill. So you could move the needle by 10% just there and then, literally just by producing exactly what you needed. You are 50% cutting water pollution. I think the world is different today, and people are looking towards sustainability, but it isn't talked about because it's difficult. And there is that, again, we've talked about how manufacturers don't like producing one piece on a time because they're not used to it. And then I think it even comes back further than that. And it was interesting because, of course, I had a little Google search and watched, I think it was what Bobby is doing, right? The reality is that product development is hard. It's not something you can do quite easily. So, product development takes a long time. So to go to an on-demand model, you tend to find that they are pre-designed products. So you have a pre-designed product and then you produce it on demand. But to actually go through that product development styling stage is quite difficult. And then you have the whole supply chain issue with having the materials in the right place, in the right colors at the right time. And, it is very complex. But I think, just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's impossible. And I think that, we're moving closer and closer to it being a reality. And it will come down to technology. Because it's only possible with technology, because, that whole sort of, enormous number of people doing these small little tasks, and the propensity to error is so much that it has to automate all the way through. And we will get there. I'm sure we'll get there. But, the whole thing on sustainability and on-demand manufacturing doesn't get talked about enough, for the simple reason that brands can't execute on it. So they don't talk about something they can't execute. But the fact is, it is not sustainable. It's the sustainable way. There is nothing more. Let's use recycled fabric, or we don't have to recycle it in the first place, right? And anyway, so I for me, that I think sustainability is its core, and it's the message, if you like. So I hope that answers your question. I'm very passionate. I could talk about the sustainability aspect of this forever because it's key. But I didn't come from the industry, and I learned it as it became very apparent very quickly how broken the supply chain model is right now.
So look, I'm going to stay on the topic for a second because I do think it's something. But so I guess my question will be, I'll flip off for a second. So Bobby, is on-demand manufacturing the only future of the industry? Is everything going to shift right to this on-demand model, or is it going to be a hybrid, or is it not going to happen? And just, if you can, share with me your point of view on that. And then I'm going to jump back on the sustainability piece to Jess Fleischer in a second. So Jess, make sure to be prepared for that as it's coming your way.
Yeah. Look, I think we are going to go into a hybrid model. I obviously want as much as possible to be on-demand produced. I think reality is it's probably going to be a mix. I could see models where you have certain customers who want things that are completely individual, so they can get their products produced for them. I also think that you will, as Kurt said, you may have much smaller batches and you produce faster. You could see models where you produce a larger set of designs, and then you reproduce larger amounts of products that sell well. So you can test the demand real time, and then you make sure you have the goods that actually is demanded. So I think you will have a variety, but I do think that on-demand thinking will essentially influence all of that. And I think the agility on the production side and on the supply chain is going to be crucial. I have a hard time to see anyone who do not think about shortening the lead times and moving towards on-demand production in one shape or form will I don't think they will go into a very bright future. I'll put it that way.
You muted.
Jess, here comes to you. Yep, here comes to you.
Yeah.
And on the sustainability, when you founded your company, when you thought about this, was sustainability at the core of your thinking at all, or did it morph as you did it, or kind of? Because again, to Sarah's point, the fact that you weren't in the industry is a huge benefit based upon what Kurt said before and what Bobby was shaking his head on, is you don't have that history, you don't have that habit that you've already formed, right? Now, you may not have done it the way that you thought it would work, but that habit is a tough thing to break, right? So I guess my question is, was it just for you? Was it, oh, you know what, I have to help participate to change things for a sustainable thing, or you know, help us share a little bit about your point of view on that and how it's affected your organization.
So sustainability has definitely always been key to us, and also when we got founded. But I'm a bit of the believer that sustainability can't go alone. You cannot force sustainability onto the individual if it's not cheaper or better product. But what I think on-demand can deliver is also a better product. So in our case, we add the made-to-measure side of it on top, right? I know Bobby does the same, and Jeff is helping companies doing the same. So you actually, as it's made-to-measure, you also get a better product, and I think that is key to sustainability and to sell sustainability to the broad audience. That is also to make a better product, and that's also why I speak about price, because I don't think we're there yet on the price side, but eventually we will get there. Eventually, made to order will get cheaper than mass manufacturing. And once we're getting to that stage, even the most old-fashioned CFO, he can't neglect it in his spreadsheets anymore. So we have to work on quality, on price, and on sustainability as our communications outlets at the same time.
Yeah, so Jeff, it seems like you want to weigh in, so I'm going to let you do that.
Yeah.
And look, we're gonna get into a whole conversation around price and cost. We got actually a question or two that have popped in on it. We have a question in our own panel around it, and it's been brought up several times right at this point already. Both Bobby, you and Jess have brought it. So we'll get into that because I think it is a concern. But Jeff, please weigh in on what you just heard.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the other aspect to sustainability that really on-demand can help with is returns, right? It can eliminate the need for people buying multiple sizes and shipping one back. This is something we're super passionate about at Bold Metrics, and we see on-demand, in projects and current clients we work with, the return rate is way, way lower than typical apparel companies, when you're selling the traditional way. So not a lot of companies really report on returns and the impact to sustainability when you can reduce returns, but that's another huge area where, this technology of on-demand manufacturing can really help with sustainability initiatives.
Great. Kurt, I'd like to throw this in. I think it's such a big topic. I'd like to see if there's another point of view or angle that you might have on this before we get into the next topic.
So on sustainability, I think that I think that the underlying, I agree with Sarah that it's really at the core of what we do. But it depends on who you're talking to, whether you should lead with it or not. When you're talking to the consumer, you absolutely should lead with sustainability. I think that's something that is really, really important. When you're talking to the CFO, you don't lead with sustainability because most of the CFOs that you deal with don't think about it that way. Now, ironically, if you go to Walmart, they realize that they make money by being more sustainable because they've reduced their packaging, they've reduced their energy usage, they've reduced their transportation. And so some of these bigger companies are starting to get it. I think it's so key to our industry. We pollute so much water, we waste so much energy, we throw so much stuff in the dump that we need to make we need to make everything much more sustainable. But I think if we focus on demand, making it more on demand, getting closer to demand and only making what we need, we become more sustainable. And the story becomes about sustainability, but it isn't how we lead with it, if you know what I mean. I think so. You need to depend on, it's called audience awareness is what I'm told. It's, who are you talking to? So I think it's really important that we focus on it, but I think we need to communicate it differently depending on who we're talking to.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think, Jeff, when you were talking about the returns, it's a sustainable play. It's right. I think Amazon spent, I don't know, over $50 billion. I mean, the number that they spent on freight, right? And I know that's shipping, but there's certainly returns that are in there. And we all, right, perhaps on this panel and any of us, and anybody who's actually listening has probably said, oh, this is so easy. I just take it back unwrapped. I just drop it off and it's done. The consequences of that, though, are real, right? They're real to the environment. They're real to the world. They're real to the countries in which we all live in, and we're a diverse group at this point. And we saw it from even the pandemic, right? When we all stopped operating, look what happened, right, to the environment, right? We all stopped operating, and 6 months in, the air is clear, the emissions, and it was just very, very interesting. So I do think, as you just said, Kurt, and the approach, who you talk to, how you talk about it, right? Sarah, the passion you have around it, that it starts with sustainability. But if you start it with the wrong person, perhaps, and that person has that habit around cost or whatnot, it might not play through. So look, I don't want to shift right now to the cost thing, but we do have, right? So how can we increase the market share at this point when you're talking that the cost, right? And I don't know when you talk cost, whether you're talking first cost, because a return, is that taken into first cost or not, right? Or you're talking about the total cost, right? And when you start to talk about total cost, I guess it's total cost of ownership, right? Is it really looked at what it really cost me if I had to mark it down? Someone had mentioned, right, the wrong stuff, the wrong color, the wrong time, right? And then I missed the right stuff because I don't have enough of it. Well, Kurt, when you talk about a different mindset around my first cost, or even a gross or even a maintain margin, right, versus a total cost, do you think the industry has yet adapted this model, looked at this model, understands the model, and then how could that help influence on demand? A lot of words there, big questions. So take it in bites, if you will. And look, I'm going to ask the group to kind of weigh in, a few of the people in the group to weigh in, because I've had a few questions came right in on cost, right? If you see me looking to my right, I'm looking at the questions that are floating in. So
the apparel industry is built on chasing the low-cost needle. We have spent the last 25 years scouring the globe to try to find the cheapest place to make garments. It was China, and then it was Bangladesh, and now we're looking in Africa, and everybody is trying to find that cheapest. And so the industry is so trained around the lowest first cost. How do I find things really, really cheap? And then do that model where I buy a container load and hope it sells. And so the biggest change that needs to take place is the mindset around going from cheap first cost to highest margin dollar. dollars and highest total margin dollars. And that's the conversation that at upper management, they're starting to finally wake up to now, particularly with the pandemic, when they were stuck with all this stuff that was out of season from, they were totally out of sync with the consumer. And so the industry is starting to wake up, but every conversation I have with somebody is, oh, this costs more than we expected. Well, if we buy a bunch of them and it doesn't sell, no, you're not going to buy a bunch of them. You're going to make 10 of them and you're going to test it. And then if that does well, then you're going to chase it with 500. And if that does well, then you're going to do 5,000. And you're going to chase the stuff that works and you're going to eliminate the stuff that doesn't work. And that's going to reduce your returns. It's going to reduce your discounts. It's going to reduce what you put in the landfill and all that. And that's that on-demand thinking. And I love that term, Bobby, that you use, on-demand thinking about how you actually think about that stuff. And now when you start to say, oh, I paid, instead of paying $20, marking it for 80 and end up selling it for 30, I pay 25 or I pay 30 and I sell it all at 70. Wow, I've done really well. Total margin dollars. And I think, that people are finally starting to wake up to that, but it's about being able to show the brands and whether they're small direct-to-consumer brands or whether they're big brands, that margin calculus and how you can actually get to total margin. And when you can do that, I think Jess, the price doesn't matter if you make the right product. If you make the right product and you sell every one of them, even if you might sell a few less, who cares? If you make them for $10 and sell them all for 20, that's a good business, rather than making them for 5 and hoping they sell. And I think that's the conversation that is finally beginning to happen, and the brands are starting to really wake up to that. And I think is the big unlock for us.
So on the Jeff Mergy, so on the data side of that, right? How can we use data to help what Kurt just said? Show the brand, show the companies, show the customers, and then Jess, I think I want to follow up with you on, have you been able to do that? Because you have mentioned cost a couple times, right? And we again, it was a topic we wanted to talk about. It's come in as questions. But Jeff, how do you use data, right, to convince them, right, that, look, you're right, but you're really wrong. You're right the way you're looking at it, but you're wrong the way it should be looked at, perhaps. Or it's a different way to look at it. I don't want to do a right and wrong here.
Yeah, I mean, it really changes the supply chain to be more digital, where you're going to have access to a lot more data. You're going to learn from your shoppers, whether it's their actual body measurements to how they like to wear the styles versus how your designer thinks they like to wear the style. And you're going to be able to use this data full circle, learn from it to build better products in the future. So it becomes much more of a data-driven supply chain, and opens up a lot of data that hasn't really existed for apparel companies. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of the value, is because you become closer to the consumer when you're manufacturing this way. And yeah, it's really consumer driven manufacturing, and that data becomes key to understanding and improving upon your supply chain and your products.
Thanks. And then Sarah, I'm going to flip to you for a minute, because you talked about your business with influencers. There was a thing about, hey, it doesn't matter necessarily. People are willing to pay a little bit more for it, right? Do you think that that these influencers and regulations can help play a role, right, on this with regard to, let's say, these unsold goods that we're talking about? That's all part of the total cost and the margin that was referenced, if you will. And do you think that we need different regulations that play into it, which again could play a role into the cost? And are the influencers that you're dealing with and the brands they're creating, are people willing to pay more money for that product, which makes on-demand more valuable and more palatable, perhaps?
I think there's very good questions. I think see, one of the things that...
Well, they're not mine. They're coming from the audience.
Okay. I think one of the things that, is very appealing for us when we work with influencers is that they have a voice. because we've all talked about how, fabulous on-demand manufacturing is, but it's just not very well known, and, it's not, there's not enough awareness. And, for the influencers that we work with, they have a voice and they have huge followers. And then I think there's a few things that we've come to find that I think, and I learned this when I had my first business, is that on-demand manufacturing is more expensive. That we all know that, but we also know that you're not producing two products, you're only going to produce the one that sells. But when you do have more expensive manufacturing, you have to marry it with more expensive fabric. You can't put an expensive production process with a cheap fabric and sell it at a higher price, because you're going to lose. So by its very nature, you have to put a good quality material, so you do end up with a better quality product. And and the other thing that for us that we were concerned about, in a way, if you like, was that the fact that people have to wait 21 days to receive it, because, we live in that instant society where I want to order something this morning and get it this afternoon. And, and all of those things were just really not a concern at all. And we found that people, they are, we actively encourage people not to overbuy, to only buy what they need. And we're there's a lot of conversation on here, and the people involved in this panel are involved in that whole sizing space, and that's something that's very big for us too. I was literally beforehand, I'm like, I wonder who I'm going to talk to afterwards, who I'm going to call about this. But that's the reality. And so people are quite happy, I think, to know that they are they're going to get, and I think Jess mentioned it as well, you've got to have a kick-ass product. It's like, I always often liken it to food, right? There's lots of organic food, but it just doesn't taste nice. But when you find an organic food and it tastes really good, you're going to keep buying it. And, that's where we like to be in terms of our apparel. Yes, it is, it's a sustainable product. It's completely on demand, but it's also fantastic. It's a lovely product. And we do spend a huge amount of time and effort making sure that everything about it is something that you would want to go and can't wait for the next time to go and buy it in every color, because that, again, is human nature. If you love it, you're going to get it in every color. So it's it's self-fulfilling, and but they have that voice. And has that answered your question?
Yeah, no, thank you. And look, Bobby, this will be a little off the on the cost topic, but a little bit off. And do you feel like practices in, and again, question coming from the audience, if you will, the listeners, do you feel practices in how companies actually do accounting, or even KPIs, right, need to change in order to drive it? Because, we haven't talked about KPIs at all and what people are incentivized to do. And do you think that those are changes that need to happen? And if so, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes. Yeah, thanks for the question. I have a slightly different view from, I guess, the group. I'm probably going to take it even more dramatic. I think that the price for on-demand produced, even if that's a single unit, at the end have the opportunity to be cheaper than a standard product. And the reason for saying that is, and where I think the industry, quite frankly, one of the big barriers faced, the incentive structure is wrong. I'm like Sarah, I'm not coming from the industry originally. I'm coming from consulting, and there you always went down and looked at margin, and you looked at what's your actual margin in the end. And what's fascinating me is you have typically, you can probably say that safely say that around 20 to 25, maybe 30%. Is average discounts today, if you look across collections. And if you, as an example, take a product that costs 100 euros and you may lose, let's say 20%, you may lose almost 20 euros on the pricing side. And then you're trying to hunt cents for the cheapest production. It just makes no sense. Why would you go and hunt and save 4 cents by doing commitments of volumes that are going to make you discount away a large share of that profit? It made absolutely no sense to me. And here's where I would love to see different incentives, where someone can look from the top and say that I'm no longer going to incentivize the buyer to go and hunt for the cheapest price. They're going to go and hunt for the amount of products and the products we need. And we will look at the total margin after discounts, returns, so we can actually compare apple to apples. Unfortunately, we are I often see I think Kurt was heading in that direction as well. When you speak to brands and say, well, this is more expensive. And it is still a little more expensive on the CMT or the production side, but in comparison, it's nothing. And it's astonishing to be honest, because it's such an opportunity for someone who will realize the potential. If you really want to increase your margin, look at how to reduce your discount from having too much overstock, and put that money into producing in a smarter way.
All right, so we've talked about sustainability. We've talked about total cost of ownership. We've just brought in incentive discussions into it. We talked about habit, and look, the word culture hasn't come up, but some people would say that's a soft word. I would say that it's probably the most important thing to shift in an organization, if you will, mindset. So Jess Fleischer, just what other macro trends? How does geopolitical, right, play into this? I mean, you know, as I take a look, right, I think you're over in Europe, right? If I know correctly, and all of a sudden, you know, a year from now, you're going to be able to, you know, all of a sudden the UK pulled out. There's a whole thing with the pandemic and vaccines, and it's the EU versus the UK and then other countries. Has that played a role? Do you think that on demand will continue, right, to excel because of macro trends in the world that are going on? I think we continue to see more division, I'd say, among countries. And if so, right, are you talking about that every country, everybody, you know, needs to have this? What are your thoughts, and what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, so definitely. So it is a trend that probably we are seeing kind of like a limit to globalization, and in a lot of regards for the worse, but also in some regards for the better. And I think nearshoring is definitely going to be a thing politically, but also economically, sustainability wise. So one of the things that we're looking into, for instance, is that North America is becoming a bigger and bigger market for us. So next year we need to build an American supply. So we produce everything in Portugal today. We need to build an American supply chain for the North American market as well. And probably one day we would need to make one for the Asian market too. And that's how it should be, because sending products from Portugal to the West Coast in the US is not sustainable. So in that regard, we are not sustainable today, and that's what we need to go at. And I actually want to, maybe I can also just comment on what Bobby said. I think like around the gross margin, I think even big companies or the bottom line, sometimes I feel like they don't look at the bottom line. So was it in 2018 or 2019 that H&M, they burned 4 billion of fresh inventory? I mean, that's just insane from all kind of perspectives. Why would you do that? And that must be because they are too top line focused. They are focused on growth, which is also unsustainable. And that's kind of like, that's this tunnel vision of looking at your market share and getting more of the growth in the rising global consumption. So I think that's a part of the problem as well.
So again, I'm gonna steer away from. I remember the numbers in the articles. I'm gonna steer away from mentioning any companies. It's okay. You're allowed to do what you want, because it's the truth, right? It was publicly stated. So fast fashion, right? Has it had its heyday? Does it still exist? Right? We all know there's great organizations out there that are from around the world that have really performed really well. There's been some that have fallen to the wayside at this point. But the one thing we haven't really touched on yet is the consumer, right? We haven't talked a lot about the consumer. And I would say, you know, is the consumer, right, are they seeking on demand? Are they willing at this point? Or are they still looking for perhaps more disposable fast fashion at this point? Kurt, you have a point of view on that? I'm going to ask a few of you to weigh in on this, and perhaps different. But again, it depends on, I think, and again, before you start, Kurt, I think we have 5 generations in purchasing right now power. And I don't think that's happened before in the world, just because of people are living longer. And it couldn't be a more stark difference between the Gen Z, right, and the oldest generation that's in the marketplace right now is how they think and buy or whatnot. So thoughts on, is fast fashion, where does that play in? And because you talk about cost and whatnot.
Well, I think that there's always going to be a place for inexpensive garments. And there's going to be a set of consumers that actually buy those. I don't think you're going to make that go away. But you can be smarter about it, like Zara is smarter about it. I'm mentioning a brand here, which is they don't make it in huge quantities. They make it in small quantities, and they're not burning stuff at the end of the year. They're making it in small quantities from factories that are nearby in Portugal and whatever. And they sell it all out. So is it fast fashion? Is it cheap stuff? Yeah. Is it going to go away? No, I don't think so. But I look at my own house. I have a 25-year-old and a 29-year-old, two girls. They're much more conscious about what they buy and much more in tune with where the world is going. And they're genuinely worried about bringing kids into a world that's got to have all these climate issues. And I think as climate becomes more and more out in front with a lot of the consumers, I think that the role that apparel plays into climate is going to become more and more obvious, and it's going to wake more and more consumers. And I think that's all part of that sustainability story that Sarah's so passionate about, is how do we make the world more sustainable? Is it going to make fast fashion and cheap fashion go away? No, but I think the idea of disposable fashion as a product is starting to lose favor with people that are worried about the climate and worried about the earth. And I think that's a really good thing.
So Bobby, just playing off that, what are some of your thoughts on, the fast fashion piece, the on-demand piece, and then does it just have to be a unit of one? We talked about small batch. Can it be larger scale? Can we actually set things back up in Europe and in the US, if you will? And not just Europe, Europe's big, right? In different locations, right? Can we get there and actually start doing more on demand, really shift the supply chain, right? From supply to demand to supply, right? And eliminate this.
Yes. I mean, I want to come back to what Jess said in the beginning. I think when it comes to consumer demand, I think we all care much more about sustainability. I think that's a fantastic sort of trend. But I also think that in order to on demand, especially if we talk about unit one, where it's individual, it needs to be the cost point. It can't be significantly higher cost, and it can't take too long to deliver. And I think here's where you're going to start having those incentives that you move production closer to the market. I think that's just the logical consequences of serving your clients or consumer in a better way. So I think we will definitely see more nearshore or even essentially close to market. I think one thing that maybe I can add to when it comes to this sustainability, I think one shift that we've seen speaking to senior stakeholders in the industry, I noticed a shift that the individuals itself, before we were a lot talking about sustainability from a consumer wants it or it's good for the environment. What I'm most optimistic about from a sustainability perspective right now is the stakeholders themselves say, I don't want to be part of this anymore. Bobby, want to make a statement. I want to work for a better product. I want to stand behind a more sustainable way of selling and producing clothes. And I think that individual drive is starting to have a real impact. And I think that's probably one of the strongest movements that I've seen towards actually making brands moving toward more sustainable practices, where on demand is clearly one of the core practices.
Mm. So that voice, right? I think we all recognize, Kurt, you reference, I guess young millennials in your home, just on the border of Gen Z at that 25-year-old, I believe, or across it. Look, I think that those generations do have a loud voice, right? And when they start businesses, I'll reference, I got a call reference the other day, I'm just going to share with the group, from a 24-year-old coming out of a university, very high-end university, right? Very, very big university. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to start an apparel brand. I'm like, why? Why would you want to do that? And she said, because I want to help change the way it's done. I want to help make it more sustainable, change have a part of changing the industry and the world. And when you hear that, I'm sitting here saying, wow, can one person really do that? And I think, Bobby, to your point, I don't think one person can do that, but I think all of us here on this panel, right, are trying to do it, right? If we didn't all listen to Greta Thunberg, right, talk, I don't think she would have gotten those groups behind things or whatnot. And it does, sometimes it takes one to start the flywheel going. But Jeff, you know, let me just come back to you a little bit on this, right? Why, you know, do you see this more in a large scale space? Do you think it could serve a more large scale? And then I want to ask a second part to it, maybe not straight down your wheelhouse on the technology side. Do governments need to get involved and help support this while the businesses are getting started to perhaps help influence, right, that with cost, the startup cost to actually bring back jobs in economies to more local places?
Did you say Jeff or Jess?
Yeah, it's you, Jeff. It's you, okay. Jeff.
Yeah. All right. So on the, I guess kind of the first part, what can it be for large orders? I think, yeah, I think it's, you know, it does give the ability for brands to see what's working and respond to customers faster, as well as actually opens up, you know, going back to the consumer side of this, like a whole new area of, you know, consumers actually getting clothes that fit them in the way they want to wear their clothes. And, you know, Jess's companies, you know, they exist because consumers are figuring out, hey, I want to have t-shirts that aren't off the shelf, but I want to have a t-shirt that is size Jeff. It's not a large, but it's actually my size and it's made to the way that I want to wear it. That's something that, you know, the majority of consumers have never had access to in their life, right? So that's going to be a huge consumer benefit of this new trend in manufacturing that's going to, I think, bring the consumer to it, and they're going to realize that. They're not going to have to sacrifice and pick what size is going to fit them best, but they can actually pick their size. On the government side of things, like, I'm not in politics at all. So, I mean, I'll say, like, I think, like, there is an opportunity, right, for governments to get involved in this and bring manufacturing closer to the consumer. Its benefits, there's jobs. These are, you know, high tech jobs. You know, the technology in the apparel industry is changing quickly. So, I mean, there's definitely opportunity for governments to get involved, and I'd be happy to help in any way to get that government money. But, you know, like, it's not, yeah, I guess that's all I can say on that front.
So I think, like,
so Matt,
if I may, I'm a little bit skeptical on politicians. I think, like, if they were to deliver, they've started to deliver already. And I'm even
yeah,
we're headquartered in Denmark, probably in some American perspective, a socialist country, which I don't believe it is, but still, and even here we can't figure out to tax carbon, which I think would be a huge advantage also to kind of drive on demand. But if there was kind of like one political movement I would like to see started, that was to tax waste or carbon. Like, I think carbon would be the easiest.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that would be a really easy way to fix the problem, is to make it expensive to throw stuff away. And if it's expensive to throw it away, then you know, if you pay by the pound what goes in the garbage, you put less in the garbage, and or tax carbon. But there are some projects going on. There's one in Honduras now called Project Huge, where they're trying to bring in a bunch of money to build infrastructure down there for nearshoring to the United States. And I think there is a role for some tax incentives in the United States for bringing back manufacturing, because if we had more manufacturing in the United States, we could solve, Jess, your problem of finding a good t-shirt manufacturer here that could actually make for you in the local market. So there is a role, but I'm so skeptical of government being able to deliver much.
Yeah. So, all right, I didn't mean to put you guys on the spot from a political standpoint, but I think you have to incorporate all aspects of the end-to-end model, right? And whether it be taxing on carbon or whether it be incentives. Look, I believe there's a lot of incentives that have been brought in the electronics industry, right? To set up facilities, whether it be in Austin or Wisconsin or whatnot here back into the US. I believe there's a significant play over to eliminate coal in the UK, and there's massive incentives for organizations coming into there at this point. It just seems like, the auto industry has certainly seen significant incentives over the years, aerospace and whatnot, technology. And it seems like this industry just seems to lag behind being able to capture, if you will, some of those to make it more viable. So how do you deal with reverse logistics on returns on custom fit or on demand in an on-demand model? Or do you deal with it, right? So Jess, Fleischer, I'll ask you that question. I'll ask you and Sarah both that. In fact, Sarah, I'll start with you on that. How do you deal with that? Because I'll let you answer, but my thing is, if it's my fit, isn't it my problem? But Sarah, how do you deal with those things?
So we're not a custom fit. So we just use general sizing. So we try to be very consistent on our sizing and have the chatbot, live chats running and things. But we do still occasionally somebody orders the wrong size. And what we tend to do with ours, it's very low. Truthfully, it's small. So we have them basically sent to an address in the US, and then we use them to send them onto samples when people ask for a sample, because we'll get requests for samples and that type of thing. Alternatively, we did initially think that we would donate them if we had them, because the way that we work is things aren't for sale. We're exclusive collections, so they're not going to go back online for sale. So, but thankfully they're touch wood, they're quite low, and I'm sure we can. We're looking at ways to do even better, basically.
So, Jess, how do you deal with the custom fit and the returns? Again, question coming in from the participants that are taking place there.
So first of all, we only have a claim rate or return rate of 3% versus the kind of like big e-commerce retailers who were up against 50% or something like that, right? So I think that's first. Secondly, I would be honest and say we haven't solved it yet. But as we grow, we are now looking into. So now we have more than 100,000 customers, and that actually gives us the advantage that they can send it back. We can look up our customer catalog, and we can actually send that model to a customer, which it will fit eventually. So that is what we're looking into for our 3% return rate to set up that system.
Yeah, and like I think Jeff, that's significantly less than numbers that I believe you've seen in your experience, right? Yeah. Again, just knowing a little bit, you've seen major reductions in the high double digits of, I think, right? So 3% is a pretty great number.
Yeah,
but how are some of the brands you're working with maybe deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, we always recommend, and the brands we work with where they're making something to someone's sizes is they'll get it right? And it goes back to the data, because you're going to have that customer hopefully for a lifetime, and you can then know this is their fit preference, this is their actual size. Like maybe it was off a little bit to begin with and they're super picky, but for the most part, returns are drastically lower when you're making someone for somebody through the technology that we use. But when it is off, there's outliers. You get it right, you save that data, so you're not going to make that mistake again for that shopper in the future, and they're going to keep coming back for you. So
look, it's fortunately, and the question was again, how do you deal with reverse logistics, returns, and custom fit or on demand? You haven't solved it yet. I don't think it's solved. I can tell you I've had my own experiences where I've custom fit a pair of denim. Again, I'll stay away from any brands or whatnot. And there's a no return policy, and it was expensive, 3 figures, right? It's over $100 US. And I called them and I said, but you actually shipped me the wrong product. I said, it's just the wrong style. I didn't order the style. And they're like, oh, we're going to have to call you back because we actually can't issue the return to you. I said, but you shipped me the wrong thing. And this was a big brand, right? Multi-billion-dollar brand. And they called me back and they refunded me and they sent me the right one. They actually didn't want the one that was wrong back because they couldn't process it. So I don't think it's solved yet at this point. And I think it's still being worked on. So for that question. So another question came in, Bobby. And again, this is one we addressed a little bit earlier, but perhaps we can, because it's really a big, broad one, that we could just make sure to just drive it home on this. Why do incumbent brands have such a challenge implementing, right, on demand? And I know, Kurt, everybody really has touched on it, right? But I think that's the purpose of why we're here today, right? What could it do? What could it mean for you and your organization? So I'd say let's look to maybe close back on that topic. You know, what can it do? And then again, why is it so difficult to implement? So let's just circle back and try and bring some different thoughts into it from before.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do at SeisMe is get the ball rolling. So we know that the structures, I mean, if you take the really big incumbents, I mean, they produce volumes that are just a lot of volume, and going in and think that you can ship everything from one day to another is not realistic. So I think here is breaking that down, and you get started in one corner and then you work yourself sort of in towards into the core of your operation. But I think it's about getting, this is not going to go away. And I think you have to get started. And I think the innovative brands that we speak to and work with have realized that. And they're starting to dip their toe in, they start test more, and they start expand from there. And I think over time you will have more. I mean, one of the issues, as we don't have enough production volume in, let's say, Europe at this point, because most of it have moved out. And if you start take advantage of what you can do today, and then you expand upon those learnings. That's at least what we advise and the way we work with our clients. I think you just have to get going and learn from there.
Get it started. And I think larger companies sometimes, you know, that fail fast mentality, it's easier sometimes with startups and smaller organizations. But I think that's a great point. It's just try some things, see how they go, and have the ability to just learn from those to move forward. So look, I want to thank everybody. We're gonna wrap up here. So really great conversation. I think that look, the audience should continue to just question, touch base with everybody on this. A quick PSA. So look, I'm actually participating in a fireside chat later on demand, and we're actually brought the whole ecosystem together. So we have a brand, Carhartt, at the table, Colleen Howe, the Director of Innovation. We have Diana Burns from Bold Metrics, DXM, myself, and we have Karsten Newberry from Gerber at 1:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to try and go end for end. So there's my little PSA for later. But I would say, look, touch base with all these organizations as you're listening, because they're all trying to move the industry forward one at a time. And if we continue to come together and grow this panel larger and larger, we're going to get there. So thank you all for the time today. What a great group and what a great chat. Thanks for letting me moderate.